Here's the thing. Modern movies have a problem. They cut and cut and cut and cut again, and by the time you're done watching a small scene, you probably already watched enough shots to have made a whole movie in the 60s. Seriously, it's almost like the average shot in cinema today lasts about long as a TikTok swipe. Every shot is quick. Every scene is chopped to pieces. And half the time you blink, you miss the entire moment. So yeah, how did we get here? Let's go back all the way to the 1930s. The world had just experienced what life looked like in Technicolor, and the silent era of movies were finally coming to a resounding transition.
Up here all day long with a pole up your back.
Oh dear, that must be terribly uncomfortable.
But amidst the metamorphosis, you pick a film like The Wizard of Oz, you'd realize that the average shot length was pretty long. It was around 10 seconds to be exact. And then you go to the 40s and the 50s and even the 60s and 70s, well, the typical shot about 8 to 12 seconds. But then something weird happened. Now, this is a list of 50 mainstream films, ranging all the way from the 30s to the 2020s, representing each decade of film. But when I plot a graph of the average shot length corresponding to every decade of cinema, notice how it dips beyond a threshold in the 70s, and since then, it never looked back. Through the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, it just kept going down. But the question is, why? Before cinema would become cinema, the filmmakers of the time were essentially just photographers. They would point their cameras at interesting things without actually realizing the potential to tell a story. One camera, one angle, and one long unbroken shot. But in 1903, in the film The Great Train Robbery, Edwin S. Porter tried something different. And although it isn't perfect by any metrics that we have now, at the time, things like parallel action and multiple shots weren't even a thing. But now, audiences could see the events in more than one shot, creating a sense of narrative flow. Lo and behold, the birth of continuity editing. Now, this kind of editing uses smooth, invisible cuts to make time, space, and action feel seamless to the viewer, making it perhaps one of the most basic frameworks of cinema. What you call cinema today wouldn't even be the same without this style. But at the time, this style of editing was fairly new. It would take years on end for this technique to be perfected. And by the time you get to the classics that you remember, this is basically a full-on success. But here's the thing, no matter how perfect the style is, there's always room for improvements. According to the film historian David Bordwell, this style of editing is still the cardinal rule in cinema, but somewhere along the 80s, Hollywood devised a new plan. The 80s brought about a change unlike anything else. Computers were now a thing, technology was now getting better, and the world was becoming digital. And as the saying goes, there's only one thing that follows technology: adoption. Lightweight cameras replaced the cumbersome film rigs. Computers could now generate graphics without actually having to film stuff. And most importantly, editing softwares like Media Composer essentially allowed the filmmakers to experiment. An experiment is exactly what they did. Bordwell argues that Hollywood didn't abandon this coherent editing style. Instead, the filmmakers cranked it up, making it faster, tighter, and more aggressive. It wasn't continuity editing anymore. It was now intensified continuity. And so, the average film that used to look like this started to look like this. Notice the average shot length. Notice how many cuts, how many new styles, and how many different shots are in these movies. If there was one thing that Hollywood was certain of at this point, it was this. The audience loved this new pacing. And unsurprisingly, feedback loops were forming. If technology had made this possible, it is the culture that made it necessary. Music videos in the MTV era were filled with this editing style, training the eyes to prefer action over everything else. And guess what the consequences are? Movies that were designed to encapsulate that exact feeling. Spectacle was now a part of cinema. But just because the average shot length was now under 5 seconds, it didn't mean that it was a bad thing. It was the industry reacting to what the people wanted. The world was now changing, it was turning global, and even from a worldwide perspective, it made sense that action blockbusters that didn't have much meaningful dialogue could break the language barriers more effectively. So if you were Hollywood, why wouldn't you embrace that fast pacing? I think we have established that there are forces that be which affect a movie's pacing. It's not really a black or white situation. It is simply something that evolved over time. But what is a choice is the frequency of it. In the 80s, yes, movies did get faster, but it was never overwhelming or out of control. In other words, there was always a balance. You could watch a movie like The Raiders of the Lost Ark or The Terminator and enjoy the fast action that it offered. But there was also room for movies like Back to the Future or The Empire Strikes Back, which were slow-paced movies that were still universally enjoyed by the audience. Now this actually goes to show that the audience don't really have a preference for short or long shots. They prefer shots that match the emotional rhythm of a movie. As long as the pacing isn't chaotic or uncomfortably boring, the movie is watchable. But the issue is, modern blockbusters rarely let us breathe anymore. I know we live in a different time and technology is simply getting outdated by the minute, but look at where we are on this graph. It is getting a bit claustrophobic. We have all seen the memes of Liam Neeson jumping over a fence with about 1,000 cuts. And yeah, maybe this is a bit of an extreme exception, but I feel like the frequency of such unnecessary pacing is something that I've felt significantly more in recent years. The final fight scene in Black Panther is all over the place. This cafe scene in Bohemian Rhapsody might just give you a headache. Fight scenes from The Gray Man, The Marvels, and I could go on and on about the number of silly cuts that all of these movies have in common. And yes, occasionally we do get a blockbuster that lets you breathe, but where is that balance? How did we go so far over that line that films are turning into TikToks? But this is what it all comes down to, isn't it? I don't want to sound like one of those tinfoil people who believes that all their actions are being controlled by some secret society. But if there is an accepted form of control that we just don't seem to care about, it is indeed marketing. And if there's something that marketing has always valued, it is our attention. And films are no exception to this. It is a clear known fact that our attention spans are dwindling by every passing minute. You have social media algorithms that are competing for your attention almost every single second, because there is value in it. But just think about this for a second. If an algorithm that has only existed for about 8 years is insanely good at understanding what the audience wants and keeps them addicted to the screens, try an industry that has been around for more than a century. The declining shot length, the unnecessary cuts, the chaotic pacing, they are what they are because that is where the value is. Overstimulation. It's not a surprise that a movie that came out in the 60s took time with every single shot. From an entertainment perspective, the world was pretty slow. It was not like they were competing for your attention. You watched a film because you wanted to, not because it was trending on social media. There was simply no need for stimulation. But now, just look around you. There are a million different ways to get that instant gratification. So, films have to compete. They have to adapt or be replaced by something else. And as long as it wants to be relevant, it'll keep adapting. I really searched for a conclusive reason to blame the industry for this fast pacing, and I feel like in a way you can. It is business after all. You as a consumer have full rights to do so. But then you realize that although the audience want longer shots emotionally, behaviorally, we keep on consuming fast-paced media. The industry lives and dies by the marketing data. So, maybe the solution to this issue, if you consider it a problem at all, is perhaps the most practical one that you can think of. Change their marketing data. Go and watch films that aren't exactly these fast-paced spectacles. If you really look for it, there are plenty of small artsy films that actually take time to enjoy the craft of cinema. There are even directors like Denis Villeneuve or Christopher Nolan who are capable of creating spectacles that are rooted in well-paced storytelling. Go and support those films. At the end of the day, Hollywood doesn't want movies to be fast. They want movies to be successful. And we as the audience dictate that. If we show love for thoughtful, intentional pacing, the industry listens. It always has. And honestly, you can see the industry readjusting. People are getting tired of these incoherent spectacles, and they're paying money to watch cinema again. Look at Matt Reeves' Batman, or Nolan's Oppenheimer, or Villeneuve's Dune. These are all slow-paced stories that all got universal attention. And that's exactly what you want to see. Look, there will always be another Jurassic Park sequel that we all hate. So will there be another superhero film that is cut beyond comprehension. But I do think that if we as the audience can seek balance, movies will finally cut to our rhythm.